Good everyone, welcome along to our council meeting on the 24th of August 2022. And to Deborah, who's joining us online and unable to be here today. Deborah, I hope you can hear the meeting. And for anyone else that is watching this using either the live stream or later, listening along to this meeting, and those that are joining us in the room, thanks for being here today. We'll open with council affirmation and karakia. Let us affirm today that we as councillors will work together to serve the citizens of Selwyn District, to always use our gifts of understanding, courage, common sense, wisdom and integrity in all our discussions, dealings and decisions so that we may solve problems effectively. May we always recognise each other's values and opinions, be fair-minded and ready to listen to each other's point of view. In our dealings with each other, let us always be open to the truth of others and ready to seek agreement, slow to take offence and always prepared to forgive. But we always work to enhance the well-being of Selwyn District and its communities. We will. And karakia, whakataka te hau ki te uru, whakataka te hau ki te tonga, kia mā kina kina ki uta, kia mā taratara ki tai, hi aki ana te atakura, he tio, he huka, he hauhu, ti hei mauri ora. Thank you, everyone. We have apologies from Councillor Grant Miller today, and as I mentioned, Deborah's online and the rest of us are in the room. Mark's moved the apology be accepted and Jenny seconded. Thank you. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Against, declare it carried. Identification of extraordinary business. I'm not aware of any, nothing's been raised with you, David. Any conflicts of interest that councillors would like to raise that aren't already recorded?
Yes, the Privilege related plan change. I'll sit back on the table.
Thanks, Malcolm. Anything further? No. We moved into public forum, and Alanya Lima is here. Alanya, thank you for coming. If you'd like to move to the front of the room, and thank you for coming in today. And team, whoever's here with you, yeah. Yeah, the microphone's there in front of you. You've know how to turn it on, then obviously the right-hand button. We allow about 10 minutes for these public forum sessions and a chance for you to address the council and talk to us about your issue. We won't enter into debate on the issue. It's really a chance for us to listen to your point of view, and if there's any need for follow-up, it'll be a decision following the presentation. We can ask some time for some questions and answers as well. So I'll hand the floor to you. Thank you.
Thank you. I assume it's all right if I take my mask off when I'm speaking.
Yes.
Thank you. So I understand that Trace has distributed some written notes from me, and I'll just talk through those. Prior to that, we filed a statement of evidence from Mr. Rule, and I understand that has been circulated in the agenda and assume it has been read as well. Certainly my written submissions assume that. So the submissions or the presentation I make today relates to the waterways closure application by the Isaac Conservation and Wildlife Trust. The application has had a somewhat tumultuous path to this point, in the sense that so I didn't appear at the initial hearing at the end of last year. There was a draft recommendation and then a final recommendation issued that was going to come to you for decision in about March, and that is when I got involved in the file. The decision was deferred, allowing for some further information to be gathered, and it was in response to that that you have the evidence of this rule that has been brought before the council, which provides more details, particularly on the financial burden of the race for the trust, and that further answers the explanations of why the trust has made the application. And what we also have that is brand new and not available when Mr. Rule's evidence was filed with you is a report from EOS relating to the ecological values of the Papua Race Network. That report was prepared for the City Council and Selwyn District Council. Now, the Trust did not know anything about their report. We did not know it was coming, and I received it on Monday, so I've only had a day or two to have a look at it, but it does make specific findings in it in terms of what segments or sections of the race are of ecological significance and therefore should be treated carefully. And I have read enough to be able to say to you, those are not, or those sections are not within the Isaac Trust water closure applications. So the report expressly thanks the Isaac Trust for providing the survey detail that the Trust obtained for their own application. In that sense, the Trust has contributed to the report prepared for the two councils at its own cost. The financial evidence produced by Mr. Rold, to put some context around that, was a limitation of council's lawyers. It sets out the alternative way of doing this would be through pipe. The range would cost upwards of $1 million. It sets out that the annual cost of maintenance, excluding the man hours, if you like, of going out and checking things, sits at around $4,500. The value of land sterilised a couple of years because of the race is about $186,000, and the loss of income from the usable land, otherwise usable land, would be about $14,000 per annum. So that makes very clear as to what the financial burden is. The affidavit also, so the evidence is also significant for providing a new written approval form that is from the City Council as landowner. That is from the private emails, if you like, between the Selwyn District Council officer and the hearings panel and Mr. Smith of the council. That evidence has been criticised and the word misleading has been used. That has caused considerable upset to the trust, which was very careful to make sure that what it said about that approval and why it was obtained was entirely accurate. Now, I have dealt with this in some detail in my written submissions here, but I do note that, and I have to put on the record for the trust, it emphatically rejects any suggestion of misleading or deceptive conduct. And the allegations about this were only discovered very recently by the trust and only by accident as a result of a number of Lugoma requests that were made. They were never put to the trust for comment. And in my submission, this is the antithesis of fairness and transparency. The principles of local government do not endorse unilateral conversations behind closed doors where the subject matter relates directly to an application by a party who is not privy to those conversations. And respectfully, this is not just poor practice, it is inappropriate and improper. So there are some fairly strong submissions made in regards to that aspect of the process. The other aspect of the process for which there are strong submissions in my synopsis here relates to the correspondence between the council officer and the hearing panel. A draft affidavit was sent to the hearing panel in July. The trust did not know this. The panel was asked what difference it made to their recommendation. In my submission, that is completely unlawful and irrelevant. The panel is functus officio. They cannot do anything more on this. The only recourse would be, if you want to know what else the panel might think about it, would be to convene a new hearing. Now, that was identified in the March meeting you had by Councillor Alexander, and the minutes record that the point made there was that if anything else was going to be done, it would have to be heard and considered again. I've set that out under written submissions here. Going back to the written approval from Mr. Smith for the Christchurch City Council, the form that he signed, the very first line says, "I am the owner of the land." And Mr. Smith has confirmed he has delegated authority to act and speak for the City Council in the capacity of landowner. So that is exactly what the trust was told to do, and that is exactly what Mr. Smith signed. The trust has also dealt with the City Council in the context of ecology. That was right at the outset. So the City Council ecological team were involved through the hearing and through the EOS report prepared for the trust afterwards. And following that, they confirmed agreement with the closure on the proviso that they would be part of or consulted on the fish salvage plan that would follow a closure. That's also set out in my written submissions. There is paragraph 10 of submissions. I know that it was unclear to me what the purpose or intention is behind Ms. Meehan's report telling you what council has spent on Fatado Finlay in relation to this matter so far. I know that sometimes the cost of effective democracy and devolved decision making does entail having to get legal advice. That's business as usual. There is no transparency or breakdown to the figure provided, so it's very difficult to tell exactly what it does relate to, whether it's in responding to the government request, whether it's giving council advice that council needs anyway, and on any number of these areas. So I submit that's irrelevant, actually. But in any event, the figure cited pales in comparison to the financial burden of this race on the trust, which is a self-funded charity with conservation of rare and endangered birds at the heart of its activities. So the trust uses its land holdings to pay for its conservation activities. And in some cases, it is the only place in New Zealand where some species are bred. The EOS report has been new. It wasn't available at the time the recommendation was made by the panel. It thanks the trust for its help in bringing the report to where it is. The report includes numerous photos of water races or sections of the race that it looked at. And these photos in my submission belie the hearings panel criticisms of the state of the water race on the trust land. When compared to the photos of other sections of the race, it is clear the race on the trust land is kept in a lawful and comparable state. Mr. Rill's evidence for completeness contains a photo of the race on one of the objector's properties, and by law claims that elevated amenity, as there were in the hearing for the closure, must be viewed objectively and fairly. There has been no inquiry into the lawfulness of the state of the race on the objector's two properties subject, and if this is going to be relied upon in the way it was in the recommendation, is my submission the lawfulness of the uses and the plantings that they refer to ought to be considered by council before a decision is made. I deal briefly with the 80% threshold, despite repeated statements by Ms. Meehan during the recent meeting with the trust, to the effect the 80% threshold has no relevance beyond proceeding to notification. The report to council is littered with references to it. For example, it is cited as a reason not to pursue option two being that you make a decision contrary to the recommendation. It is presented as highly relevant to the path from this point. The trust rejects that. The policy under which council has to make its decision does not mandate 80% support, and it does not specify how the 80% is calculated. As noted by the council's lawyer at the closure hearing, council has discretion to progress to consultation notification, even if the 80% threshold is not surmounted. Council does not have a policy guideline or rule as to how directly affected people are identified or how the 80% is figured out. In this case, how the numbers are and have been sliced and diced makes a difference to whether the 80% is met or not. And in any event, this is an unusual situation because the race is within the city council boundaries and rates are not paid in respect of it. This makes the appropriateness of using rating units dubious. And only 8 to 9% of the section proposed to be closed is subject to opposition. Over 90% of the section proposed to be closed lies within or adjacent to properties that support the closure. This is one number that cannot be changed and has remained consistent throughout the process. Looked at this way, it is my submission that 8% support is met. I've dealt briefly already with this, the section I go on to talk about as to the relevance of what the panel thinks, and I won't repeat that now in the interest of time. And so I turn to my very last section, which is headed controversy. It is understood from the Laguna responses the trust has had that council has not yet approved a publicly initiated closure application in the face of opposition. In my submission, this is unsurprising, given council has only relatively recently moved to allowing consultation and notification on proposals where there is less than 100%. So this approach is still in its infancy for this council. The policy shift is important. It is a clear signal of council's intent that sometimes a section of race will be closed, even in the face of opposition. This requires council to be more thorough and rigorous in assessing these applications. At times, an application will be hard, and reaching a decision will challenge council. This does not mean it is controversial. This is a natural consequence of what council decided in 2018-2019 when it moved from 100% to 80%. And in this case, we had a restricted race of about 2.7 kilometres. Opposition centres around a claimed private amenity value relating to a mere 240 odd metres of that race. One of the opponents lives next to the race, but is not on this land. The detriments claimed must be evaluated and considered against benefits for those who are affected by just over 90% of the section to be closed. The tangible costs and burdens for the trust are outlined by Mr. All. And to alleviate concerns further, the trust is prepared to offer to meet the reasonable costs of installing an alternate water supply, e.g. water tanks, up to $15,000 on the two properties which have the race on their land. To be lawful, any condition of that sort can only require an offer. The trust has already done this for one person that provided written approval, so it knows that the costs are reasonable. And that is all I have in my written submissions.
Oh, thank you very much for that. Sorry, I didn't catch your name, Alania, the man beside you, but welcome to say anything further if you would like to support that.
So Mr. Wald has presented on this matter throughout, and Mr. Wald has provided the evidence he'd like to speak shortly, if he can.
So I just have a small statement. I'm the operations manager for the Isaac Conservation and Wildlife Trust. We've been pursuing the matter of attempting to close the water race for some time. We have approached all downstream users, and to date we've had a significant number agree to it, and obviously we have some objectors. I've personally met with all the objectors and looked to see if there's ways and means that we can negotiate any and just help with any concerns that they may have. Unfortunately, that was not successful. We have some obviously financial reasons for closing the water race. We also have recently purchased land at 25 Jessens Road that the water race closes over, that runs over, that we wish to close. And part of that land has some fairly old and fairly significant trees along the water race, pine trees, willow, macrocarpa, and poplar, and some of those trees are near the end of their life, and we need to do a lot of maintenance on that area, and having that water race right underneath them is a major problem to us, apart from all of the other issues that have been outlined before. Obviously, the management of stock on our dairy farm is significant from an operational perspective to work, because the water race bisects our dairy farm. You would argue that 20, 30, 40 years ago, it wasn't an issue, but with the present laws and requirements around water races and water bodies, Fonterra has placed additional concerns on us, where we have to fence that water race, we've got to maintain it. And that, of course, is a more recent cost to the trust that it didn't bear originally back when the water race was initially installed. If the water race was to run down the boundary on the road and in the road corridor, it wouldn't be such a major issue to us. But we're faced with the waterways sort of meandering through probably a half a kilometre to a kilometre of dairy farm, and then it bisects the dairy farm. That does give us considerable operational concerns. Finally, I guess I've talked a wee bit about the other supporters of the waterways closure. The Christchurch International Airport has supported the closure purely from a bird strike perspective, where they just do not want bodies of water close to an operational runway, and that's exactly what we've got here. So they certainly support it from that perspective, and that's a major safety issue. We've also got originally the two farms that did use the water race originally, the Thornton farms. Mr. Bill Thornton passed away, and now Majors own it, Majors Contracting, and they've agreed to the closure. And the final bit of farm that his son Barry Thornton owned, we've purchased, and that's another reason why we'd like to close it. So there's a lot of reasons why we'd like to get it closed, and there's also a lot of reasons why our supporters of the closure want it closed. Also, of course, there's the City Council closure, where the road realignment on the top corner of McLean's Island Road is going to involve substantial earthworks, and it will involve the modification of the irrigation water race. And we've I requested our tender team to cost out what the additional cost will be to replace the southern water race, the stock water race, and that cost is in the vicinity of $47,600. So that will be an additional cost that will have to be done if the water race is allowed to stay open as part of the road realignment.
Cool. Thank you for sharing that with us today. Deborah, I know you had something to share online. There may be some questions that councillors have. The matter that's in front of us today is not a hearing where we are going to be debating the merits of the closure or otherwise, and we've dealt with this a few times recently around plan changes and what the decision is in front of council as these papers come back to us. But if there's matters of clarification that the councillors have around the presentation this afternoon, let's have those questions and answer if we can. So Deborah, you had your hand up before. I'll just throw to you.
Sorry, can you hear me if my video comes on?
Yeah, we can.
Can you hear me clearly?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I'd just like to ask a question as the chair of the hearing panel. We closed the hearing on the 16th of February 2022. I'd just like to understand from the speakers today, the information that they are now bringing before council, has that fully been brought before the hearing panel before closure?
I didn't catch all of that question, but no, that is the reason for the information being supplied, is that it was intended to respond to the aspect of the Butterfinlay letter that we received in March that said that has not been covered at the hearing, and if you'd like to produce more information on it, please do so. That is what was done. In addition, the EOS report dated May 2022 that I saw on Monday for the first time could not possibly have been for the panel because it wasn't published then.
Thank you. Deborah, does that answer your question? Yep. Anything further from councillors? Appreciate you taking.
Oh, no, yeah, sorry, but like getting there. I'll take this off if I'm allowed. I just want to see a bit of clarification. You make make statements here about the way we calculate the 80%. So you understand the 80% threshold. So you're disputing the way that we've calculated that. How have you calculated the 80%? Is it on the numbers of people who are affected, or is it on length of race? I'm just not sure. I haven't had a chance to read the paper that you've delivered to us. How are you calculating that, and where do you think we've got it wrong, if indeed you appear to think we've got it wrong?
So my point is more that it doesn't matter for the decision. The council tells us, and he's told me personally a couple of weeks ago, that that threshold matters in terms of progressing it to notification. So I am saying that it doesn't mean that you decline it just because it's less than 80%. But what I am also saying is how that figure is arrived at does not seem to be transparently recorded anywhere. And in my submission, the more appropriate way to look at that, if you think it needs to be looked at for the decision, which I say it doesn't, is to look at the length of race and to figure out what proportion of the proposal is supported and opposed. Because this is not rated. It's not the same as the ones in counts in Selwyn that are dealt with by way of rating units.
So you're disputing that we don't have jurisdiction over these races, so therefore our LTP processes. So
No.
that's a fundamental change in focus as to who's hearing these submissions. Then, so you're disputing who the hearing commissioners are as well.
No, I don't. Certainly don't read any of the submissions that I've made. I haven't raised a jurisdictional impediment to the council deciding it.
But you're here in front of us today submitting, so I'm just trying to understand. I'm trying to understand who you think has got jurisdiction over it. If you're indeed speaking to us, if you think the process is wrong, why submission to us? Why you're not taking a different tack to it?
Well, so I'm not saying that this council cannot decide it. I am saying there are things the council needs to consider before the decision is made, and that is why we are here today, to bring the information before the council, so when it makes the decision, it makes an informed one.
So you don't believe the 80% is relevant?
I don't think it matters as a submission, and that is certainly it. I just finished my sentence. That is what council has told the trust on numerous occasions, including at the first hearing from council's own legal advisor.
Mark. Thank you, and thank you for your presentation. I'm just seeking clarification in my mind what it is you're seeking in the process you think we should follow. You're opposing the recommendation to keep the stretch of race open on the basis of information that's been available post the closure of the hearing and the decision of the hearing panel. So are you seeking that council essentially have another hearing to reconsider the proposal in the light of the evidence that wasn't available at the date of the hearing?
So I think it's important to remember that your hearing panel made a recommendation. There has not been a decision yet, and that is a job the council has. And really what the trust is seeking, if you like, as an outcome is captured at my paragraph 22. There are a number of elements of what has happened, including new information that would lean or tend toward the need for a new hearing if the council is inclined to otherwise accept the earlier recommendation. So that encapsulates it.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you for taking the time to come in today and present it to us. It's a matter that's we've got a chief executive report, and then there's the next report on our agenda. So you're welcome to stay and listen to the debate at that time.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you. We've got the confirmation of minutes from the 10th of August. Mover and seconder for those. Malcolm, thank you. And a seconder, Sophie, thank you. Any discussion on those minutes? Mark?
I have a correction for items 7 and 8. It was noted that 4 councillors abstained. I suspect it was my name that should have been in the abstentions rather than Councillor McInnes. Or it should have been an addition as well. Or did I not abstain? Perhaps I didn't abstain. I thought it may be my mistake. But more importantly, I come back to the discussion on item 6. It is my view that we have, in these minutes and as a general trend, the minutes have become too brief. While they are not intended to be Hansard in a verbatim reflection of the discussion in a meeting, they should, in my opinion, reflect, at least allow the reader to understand the breadth and depth of the discussion that was held at council. These minutes do not. Particularly on item 6, there was considerably more discussion than the minutes reflect. And I think that's unfortunate because the reader who wasn't there at the meeting cannot, from these minutes, get an impression of the discussion that councillors had on the topics in the report. Therefore, they are not a fair recording of the minutes. I don't want them verbatim. I think that would be difficult and prone to other problems, but they should actually reflect the breadth of discussion that we had on the topics that we discussed, so that the ratepayer and residents can know the diligence with which we approached our work. And I don't think these minutes do.
Noted. And are there any other comments or queries around the minutes that are there? No, it's been moved and seconded. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Anyone against? Declare it carried. Chief Executive's report, tab 7, page 16 of today's agenda.
Mr. Mayor, councillors, good afternoon. So starting off on page 16, this report's generally for information. So we've attached the pre-election report, which is available and is being circulated. Advice that tertiary scholarships are currently open and will remain open until September 30. Top of page 17, we refer to some business support meetings that are being held in Tiara Aotea starting September 14, 28 and then October 12 and 26, and just address there for bookings. Advice to the community in respect of the opening of the Prebbleton Domain pump track. Medium density housing consultation, which starts tonight, 6:30 at Tiara Aotea. Tomorrow, Prebbleton Hall, 12:30 through 2 p.m. And tomorrow evening, Lincoln Events Centre, Nicholas Hall, also 6:30 through 8:30. And finally, Mr. Mayor, advice that we have signed the transition support package from central government to assist us offsetting costs associated with facilitating the value of assets and liabilities associated with Three Waters, and there's a work program that we've got to follow through to have in place by 31st of March next year to do that. And the available funding to us under that package, 574,000 plus GST, and that's received by way of application after the work has been completed. Happy to answer any questions on any aspects of that report, Mr. Mayor.
Thanks, David. Mark.
Thank you. I had a question on the medium density housing consultation as to, and I pre-circulated it to Mr. Harris and yourself, about developers have come out with an announcement that they're going to use covenants to defeat any zoning change this plan change may bring about. And I have been asking the community what can council do if this happens, because it seems a pointless exercise to have a plan change that is immediately defeated by another legal procedure. We could save ourselves a lot of money and not do it if that's what's going to happen.
Thanks, Mark. I'll defer that question to Tim, who will respond to it.
Thank you, and through the chair. Covenants, land covenants like this are essentially a legal promise between the vendor and the buyer of the land to do and not do certain things. It's a process that is outside of council's ability to influence, and often we're unaware of that agreement until it arrives in council in the form on the title. So it's something that we cannot do. I understand that central government is aware of the issue, and there are discussions about what they may do to address the issue of the covenants thwarting the purpose of the act. But at this stage, council, in my understanding, can't do anything about these matters.
And on that, Mark, it's been raised with Minister for the Environment, Minister Parker. I've raised it with him. I met with the National Party's housing spokesperson, Chris Bishop, last week, and raised it with him as well. DI, Department of Internal Affairs staff are aware of the issue, as are MFE staff. So they're well aware of how it affects us, but it's not just us. It's around the country, this issue. But as Tim has answered, it's outside of those changes. Deborah, you had a question?
Yes, I did. For point of clarification, if I remember reading Plan Change 69 for Lincoln, I think the hearing commissioner in his decision, and it will need to have to be reviewed or looked at, made reference to covenants being made available to the council to actually protect the wastewater treatment plant. So if that's correct, then I guess the question is, are these covenants in fact a third-party agreement? How exactly are they to be enforced if that is the situation?
It sounds pretty speculative. There's a lot of ifs there, Deborah. Maybe it's a question that we can have a conversation with Tim about if there's something that needs to be followed up further outside of the meeting. And Tim, unless you've got something you can add to that now.
I think we probably need to understand the question a bit better, so I've reserved.
Deborah, we'll get you to follow up in the room. It's just a bit hard to catch that online. Thanks.
No, that's okay. I'd like it actually followed through, so we all have a clear understanding about where these covenants actually do sit. Appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you. Anything further for David's report? Mover and seconder. Thanks, Malcolm. Seconder, Nicole. Thank you. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Anyone against? Declare it carried. Thanks, David. The next item is a potential stock race closure hearing, McLean's Island Road, Fatado scheme, item 8, and on page 23 of today's agenda, Daniel.
Everyone can hear me? Kia ora koutou. This report presents the hearing panel's recommendation following the hearing conducted to consider potential or proposed closures of stock water races. This hearing was held to hear and consider some submissions and objections received during the public notification period and consultation phase that occurred in August last year. And that included the McLean's Island race, which is the subject of this report. The hearing panel was selected by Council in October last year, and the hearing was held in December. The final recommendation from this panel was published in February, 16th February 2022, and can be found as Appendix B to this report. This was due to be considered by Council back in March. However, Council received some late correspondence, including a Lagoima request that sought deferral of this decision. This was responded to, and further submissions were received and made by the applicant. These submissions and correspondence are noted in the report and can be found as attachments in the appendices. My report collates all the relevant information for Council to make a decision regarding this race, and this report recommends to support the hearing panel's recommendation, notes further submissions received, and this section of Stockwater race should remain open.
Thanks, Daniel, for that. Can I just ask around the process then to get here? The hearing panel made a decision. There were further submissions received. Did the hearing panel hear and receive and make a decision on those submissions? Yeah. Or is that just coming to us now?
There's been quite a lengthy process since the hearing panel had the hearing in December. So when the hearing panel had their hearing, information was presented at that time. There was a draft recommendation published, and that provided an opportunity for applicants and people who submitted to provide clarification and other things around their submissions. That then closed, and prior to this meeting, there has been an opportunity for people to submit further. That is for Council's consideration, not for the hearing panel.
Okay. For us as a council, the reason for having a hearings panel is so that we don't end up in a merits argument around here with all of us having particular views and we give away these decisions around the private plan changes that are there, and people with expertise and thought to focus on it. And we do the same with dog control issues, and we've done the same around water race closures. So I'm feeling like you're asking us to make a decision on the merits of the closure rather than just on the procedure of accepting the recommendation of the hearings panel, but just looking for some advice around am I hearing that correctly?
Can I suggest that we ask the panel members to make some comments before we hear around the table from councillors, Mr. Mayor?
Bob?
Yeah, I sat on that on the panel, and my opinion was at that stage that there was an 80% threshold, which has been discussed here, and I believe that we make policies, and I think we looked at that and we went through the whole procedure of the hearing, and Deborah will speak for herself, but we both came up with the opinion that it should stay as it was through all the information, and there's been no information since that has really changed my opinion on that. So at this stage, I'd like to move that we do A, B, and C as on the report.
Thanks, Bob. Deborah?
Thank you. As a member of the hearing panel, I will second Councillor Mugford's motion. But I would like to explain to the panel with regards to the information that has been put before you today, with regards to the sale and purchase of properties, and one of the three parties changing their mind about appealing the process. From my perspective, this information hasn't been put before us as a panel, but it is now being put before you as a council. So I just want to highlight that matter.
Thanks, Deborah, for that. What's the process for, we make a decision, one or the other. These decisions then do they ever come back, Daniel, to you for the same application again? Is there like a stand down period when someone doesn't get an answer? Is there an appeal process? What happens beyond council making a decision?
So I guess the applicant would be able to reapply for a closure with new application forms if they formed the 80% support and the closure process could be followed again. That's one option. I guess there's the standard options that following a council decision that the applicant has as well.
Mark, and then Murray and Malcolm.
Thank you. Just want to understand the process. When you say that, Daniel, that further submissions were called for, was that from all the submitters or just the trust?
All the affected properties had the opportunity.
And the only submitter that supplied more information was the trust?
Yes, correct.
Thank you. I think I end up standing by my comment that I've been quoted on in March, that we constituted a hearing panel, it heard its decisions, it closed its hearing and made a recommendation. The availability of further evidence post the hearing cannot affect the decision that was made on the basis of the evidence that was given. And the decision of council is either to uphold the panel's decision or, and it isn't or, we can as council decide to hold a new hearing, a completely new hearing going back to square one on this section of water race and seek a whole new round of submissions and hold a completely fresh hearing, which would probably be best with a new set of commissioners, a new set of councillors to hear and deliberate on the panel on the issue. Rather than that, I think there is the usual process of an unhappy party seeking a review of council's decision-making process and the associated costs. So I'm not sure where I sit on this, actually. I certainly don't think we're able to add to sort of, reopen closed hearings is definitely unusual. I don't think it's a good process. So that leaves us really the two choices: either adopt the recommendations in front of us or acknowledge that there is new information available that the hearing didn't have and ask for a new hearing. I guess we'll come to the vote. If we vote down these recommendations, then we have the ability to consider a new hearing.
Thanks, Mark. Murray?
Yeah, thanks. Daniel, just obviously asked questions before in public forum around the 80% and understanding that 80%, and it's complicated a little by the fact that it's cross-boundary closure that we're talking about. My recollection of the 2018-2028 LTP, when we changed the priority of how a privately initiated closure came about, was that the 80% enabled more private closures to be advanced. Are we really clear in our head with the challenge that's been put to us today that we're calculating that 80% and it's clearly articulated in the process? Because the understanding when we sat around the table, and certainly with myself, Councillor McKevity at the time, and Councillor Watson, when we discussed this with that wider group, was that it was clear that it was the number of ratepayers, not the length of race. It was also fairly clear that a council-initiated one had different criteria, and we have to differentiate between the two types. So we've advanced a number of closures since then. I think there's fairly good precedent there for how we go about that. Are we comfortable in those decisions we've made previously and that this one is being advanced in the same way?
Short answer is yes. I guess the 80% threshold, that is the threshold to commence the public consultation phase. So and then the process that goes on from there, the hearing, all of that happens after that. Yes, it is based on rating units. The complication then comes with how council accesses that rating information into the Christchurch City boundary. We sought information from our colleagues at Christchurch City. That was when an extra property was identified, and that's when the percentage was known to be less than 80%. So yes, I'm confident we have the 80% threshold in how we answer that.
So one of the things we raised at the time when we discussed this back in March, was it, Sam? Sorry, in March, was the uncomfortableness about having to sit and hear a closure outside of our takeaway, essentially, although we have the control of that from an economic perspective, in that we have the costs borne by this council. Assuming we pass this today, and there is the opportunity for this to be relitigated. This may have already been asked by Mark, but I just want to get clarity in my head about if there was another application made, would it immediately be rejected because of the 80% threshold, assuming the same objectors came to the party?
Yeah, if the same application came in today for the same length with the forms that we have now, yes, it wouldn't be able to proceed because it hasn't got 80%.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, I'm hearing about a hearing that's been closed, and then I'm hearing about a call for more evidence, and it's not going before the hearings panel that heard the original evidence. It's coming to us, and I'm very concerned about the provision of natural justice and the people who heard it in the first place making the recommendation to us when there's obviously been another environmental report and there's been more information brought to the table. I'm feeling increasingly uneasy, and I'd suggest that perhaps this might be better to lay on the table to make sure we've got our ducks in a row. I'm seeking guidance from the Chief Executive on this. So, as I said, we've got two decisions that we could make today. We remind ourselves that Council appointed a panel to consider evidence and to make recommendations for our endorsement. And they heard that evidence and made a decision based on the evidence that was available to them. Now, after the event, on the day of decisions,
we're being asked to consider something else. And I question the timing about that. So we either A, accept the recommendation of the panel that we appointed, having done their job, or we start again. And if we reject it and start again, that will mean that everybody that's been involved in the process so far will have to put a line through everything they've done, start again, incur additional cost, time, and will be no further ahead. So I defer back to the two members of the panel and the comments that they've made, that they're confident about the process, confident that they've got the right decision. Thus, the reason for the recommendations, the top of page 23.
Thanks, David. And I don't know that there's more information that's required, Malcolm, to as a reason for it to lay on the table. I think there's enough in front of us today to be able to make the decision that's required. So unless there's something specific that you think is missing from here. Yeah, thank you. Jim.
Yeah, I usually don't speak without giving a lot of thought. Unfortunately, in this case, I haven't. I'm not really up with the play as such, and I'm feeling a little bit confused would be the word for it, to be quite honest with you. And this 80%, I do recall us discussing it, but 80% does seem a rather blunt instrument, because you could have, say you had a kilometre of water race with 3 people on it, 2 lifestyle blocks, one of a 1,000-acre farm, and in effect, 2 lifestyles could really hardly ever use it, but the 80% could be easily obtained or whatever. It does seem a blunt instrument. And then there's that problem of distance, problem with numbers. But that's our problem to sort out. But I kind of think that we, in these sort of situations, we want win-win most of the time. And I'm not too worried about having to reform another committee. If we genuinely think that there's new evidence that needs to be put before a committee, whatever it is, and that we should be doing that. I mean, the Isaac Wildlife Trust is a respected organisation. I'm not here in a frivolous way. And if it was a frivolous way, I'd be right against it. But they are here for a reason, and they've obviously thought about it quite well. And they've offered, I see, to put tanks in it. Is that right? To help the people further down. And have we discussed that? And was that part of that committee's did they know about that at the time? It just seems to me that if we just sit back, wait for a little bit, and see what eventuates, and maybe with a little bit more dialogue and communication, we might be able to get around this without a lose-lose situation. And I would suggest, like Malcolm, and I hate doing this because I do like to kick things along, that we just sit back and reflect on it, because we may have, no disrespect to the committee, they went on what they were, you were told certain things. It sounds to me like there may be a bit of a different reflection that we can put on it. I would like to sit back and just dwell on it for a while and make sure that we get the right answer. If we have to form another committee, so be it. Let's get it right, so at least most people or everybody are happy. I'm sure we can come up with that. Thanks.
Thanks, Jeff. I think the changes in land use and the regulatory requirements that are affecting rural land all over Selwyn has been, and Christchurch has been a case, Murray, you've been at us, on us and with us for the last 5 or 6 years around particularly the Upper Ellesmere closures, and the way that things that have been very important for land use for 100 years are now no longer required, and the transition for that has been quite difficult because some people are ready to let go of things before others are, and the needs for particular landowners can vary over time. I see the decision today as, do we support the hearings panel that we appointed to make a decision at a point in time with the information that was available to them at that time? And do we agree that process was done properly? Yes, I think that it was. And then the next piece as well, is there some new stuff that could be considered? And if there is, then the applicant can reapply, albeit, Murray, you highlighted that there may be another hurdle there. Or as a council, we can consider that because of where we're at with this particular process, maybe there's another conversation we want to have. But I don't think that needs to get in, for me, it doesn't need to get in the way of approving what the hearings panel was set up to do in the first place on a particular day with the evidence in front of them to make a decision. And if we get past that point, then we can actually think about, are there some next steps that we would like to take? And I think we have policies to help us, and they can be guides for us, but they don't also have to be the thing that rules us. And so we need to think about the context in which they set limits and parameters on decisions going forward too. So I think the hearings panel for the work that they did at the time, and for the report that we've had today, and Daniel for the work that you've done, and for those that took part in the hearing for bringing the evidence that was before them then. Is there anything further that people would like to add or say on the matter?
Can I say one thing? And you did say, and I don't agree with it, that we're voting on the hearing panel. We're not voting on what the hearing panel came up. We're voting on the recommendation that was put before us. So there's any vote is not against the quality of the hearing panel. It's the recommendation. I would like that made clear.
Daniel, was there anything that's been raised that you'd like to clarify?
No, I think I'm good.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded that we support the recommendation of the hearing panel. Note the further submissions and confirm acceptance of the hearing panel's recommendation. All those in favour say aye. Anyone against?
I'm against it.
Two against, declare it carried. Thank you for the discussion there. And Daniel for bringing the report. We're now on page 130. This is Plain Change 79, Prebleton, and Councillor Malcolm Lyle is stepping away from the table.
Good afternoon, Council. This is a procedural decision. So Plan Change 79 at Prebleton. It is in front of you to accept, adopt or reject the plan change for notification so that it can go out to public consultation. Any questions, please?
Any questions, or a mover and seconder?
Moved by Jeff.
Moved Jeff, seconded Bob, thank you. Sophie.
Got a question.
Yep.
So given recent plan change decisions and stuff, and Tim's wonderful appearance on TV the other night, so I know the question is going to be asked, so I'll just ask it now. If the MPS HPL comes out during this process, does it have to be taken into account, or if the fact that we're accepting it for notification today, does that mean that if it comes out in however many days Mr. Parker thinks that it's likely to come out in, mean that it's not going to be part of the hearings considerations?
The recommendation of the assuming that it is accepted, the recommendation of the Commissioner at the other end will take into account all relevant national policy statements, including the MPS HPL, if it is gazetted by the time we get that far.
Any further questions? All those in favour say aye.
No, hang
Against?
on, Sam.
Sorry, Deborah, I didn't see your hands. Yep.
Sorry, I had it. Sorry, can I ask a question?
Go now.
I've actually asked this of staff, so they are prepared for this question. We go to the report that's written, and with regards to climate change considerations, it's mentioned that the site is not located within a susceptible, floodplain area, a high-risk floodplain area, or high-risk floodplain. Just with regards to the recent 1 in 5 year flooding that we've actually had, is this land area outside the dip on the road in Birches Road that is subject to our flooding maps under the district plan. Just want to clarify that particular issue. Thank you.
If you have a look at the map on page 131 of your agenda, showing the location of the plan change area, it's essentially a triangle with a couple of the bottom corners cut off. The southeastern corner, the property adjoining the plan change area, is a high hazard area by the regional council definition. If you have a look at the planning maps available on council's website, it does show as being a metre deep in water and a 500-year flood. That's partly, to my understanding, that's partly why that land is not included in the plan change area. There are some areas within the plan change area where consideration will need to be given to the appropriateness of development in relation to flood hazard, but that is one of the things that will be considered through this substantive hearing.
Thank you for that explanation.
Thanks, Deborah. All those in favour say aye. Anyone against? Declare it carries. Thank you. Thanks, Rich. The next item is page 138, the reclassification of Park Reserve 4918, local purpose. Moved Councillor Alexander and seconded Lyra. Is there any discussion or comments on this? All those in favour say aye. Aye. Anyone against? Declare it carries. The next item is tab 11, page 147, authority to grant lease over recreation reserve in Greendale pursuant to section 54(1) of the Reserves Act. Moved Councillor Lyle, seconded Makefridge. Mark.
The question I had was, in considering this report, was that of considering the situation of the Whedon's domain and the Whedon's the community building on the Whedon's domain and the use of it by the Whedon's cricket club. And I'm just trying to compare the two situations and gain an understanding of whether a similar recommendation will be coming forward to us with respect to the situation at Whedon's, where the cricket club uses the building at the weekends when they're playing cricket, and it's available for community use pretty much every other time, which appears to be the situation here. So in terms of being fair to clubs within the district, I mean, even blended approach to clubs within the district, where a similar approach might be taken at Whedon's.
Yes, it's something that this reflects historically, what was used there. That's certainly something we can consider going forward.
Do you want an application on a similar basis from the Whedon's Cricket Club, or will you consider it on the basis of fairness and natural justice?
I suppose we'd probably have to look at the individual situation of what's there currently and what sorts of frameworks are in place, and if there's anything pre-existing. I suppose with Greendale, because it was picking up on a situation that was sort of left unsealed after the disestablishment of committees, that's sort of come from that, so come from a different angle. But yeah, I mean, we can definitely look into what sorts of frameworks may be in place there already with Whedon's, and yeah, have a look into it.
Thank you.
No worries.
Thank you. Anything further? Was moved and seconded. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Anyone against? Declare it carries. Thank you, Bianca and Rob. Next up, we have the location of the proposed community facility for Leaston, Fatado. Sorry, yes, moved Councillor Lennon, seconded Councillor Epiha. Any questions or comments that people would like? This was a Denise report. She's unable to be here today. Is that right, Dave?
Yeah, she's unwell this afternoon. No, especially.
Murray.
Yeah, thanks, Sam. Well, trying to be brief here, it's just an exciting time for the the whole Ellesmere community, actually, not just Leaston. I think it's going to be a significant addition to the Selwyn landscape. And conversations with Denise last week, I think exciting time about the way that services are delivered as a bit of a template going forward for our community facilities. And we've put in significant time and effort to secure the properties and part two of the recommendation. And it's really good to now put a line in the sand and say this is what their use is going to be for, most likely before, I should say. That final exact position is yet to be determined, and the nature of the consultation we have with all user groups going forward will determine that, and the new council will make that determination. So just, congratulate the completeness of the report, and look forward to the work happening in the near future.
Thank you, Ray. Anything further?
So just quickly from me, Sam, Tēnā Tātou. Yes, just following on from Ray's comments, very grateful community on behalf of the Ellesmere community. It's a wonderful project, and it's going to be an absolute asset for the district. So a lot of gratitude. Just clarification on the name again. The name of Fatado is the working group name and not the name of the facility. Just that clarification again. Thank you.
I think that's what we've been previously told, that it's the project title rather than the facility title, David.
Yes.
Yep.
No. Yeah, look, I just wanted to note that with Denise there, I'm just going to say that with Mark being recovered from Operation Sandrine, we were having to go to medical point today, and Denise unwell. I was going just to take back any comments that Denise was fronted, so that's cool.
Denise, we can see your face online, so I couldn't see that you were in the meeting until your video was on. So if there's anything further you would like to add to the conversation, feel free now.
Just the bit that I would add is that the project name is Waihora Whātaro, but the facility has been named, and it's named Whātaro. So there are two different titles. One is a working title for the whole complex, including the Leaston Park, the surrounding landscapes, as well as the facility itself. But Whātaro is the name that was formally requested from Ngāi Hiwi, and has been gifted, to Taumutu, and has been gifted to council for that facility. And it came with the cultural narrative as well as the cultural design brief. So the name of the facility has been decided. The Waihora Whātaro is the name for the project in its entirety.
Thanks, Denise. Shane?
Thank you, Denise, and a beautiful name, and no disrespect, and I've asked this on many occasions, that the naming of the facility should be in conjunction with all members of the community. And as Sam just said then, he also thought the name, Fatado, was the name of the project working group, of which you've just now stated that it's Waihora. And there was comments around the table previously around the adoption of that name. However, it is a working name. I guess the concern is that all parts of the community would like to be consulted on naming of the facility and the community hall, as it might be in the library. And then I guess there'll be some dissatisfaction around the community, particularly the committees, around the lack of that input. So I'm not wanting to put you on the spot, Denise, right here today, but is there potential for that to be looked at? I don't know if I haven't heard that name brought to council to be adopted, and whether that's an operational matter that's within your scope. Then I understand, but I'm unclear and clearly confused. Thank you.
Okay. If I could just state that it was part of the conditions of being provided with a cultural narrative and a cultural design that came with the name, and that was accepted by council. My apologies if there has been some mistake around that, but it would be disrespectful in the to a great extent to turn around and change the name. That was the agreement initially.
Thanks, Denise. I think for us to reflect on that, we haven't named facilities other than when we've worked with mana whenua on a name. Normally a named facility, well, when we have named a facility, we've actually just described the facility rather than it actually having a name. So we've called it the Selwyn Sports Centre or the Darfield Library, or and that's what it is. Te Ara Atea is the first that actually the name means more than just the description of what the building holds within it. And I see this Fatado, I was unsure as you were, Shane, around the actual name, but I welcome Tomutu's involvement and partnership around what that means. And I think it's another step forward for us as a community to try and understand more of our history, expand and have a richer conversation about what it means to live in Selwyn and the journey of our own history and where this takes us going forward. So appreciate the clarification that you brought today, Shane, and the conversation with Denise. Mark.
Thanks for all the conversation that's gone before me. I just perhaps suggest that if we haven't already, that the name and its meaning be recirculated to councillors so we can refresh our knowledge and understand its name, because I'm not sure what the cultural background and its meaning in this context is, and would appreciate the sharing of that knowledge.
Yes, it has previously been circulated to council, but very happy to do that again.
Thanks, Denise, for that. We had a mover and second now. Yes. Oh, Deborah, sorry, thank you.
Thanks, Sam. And I appreciate Denise actually being online. I know what it's like when you're not well and trying to actually sort through your thinking. Just with regards to the name Waihora, we have over in Motukarara, we have Waihora Park. In Taitapu, we have, which is next door, we have a close association with Waihora Rugby Club. And we also have a roading name project where we actually discuss the close association of our roads, so we don't get confused as to where to send people, I guess, if they're looking for a location to find. And I just wonder whether there could be some policy or information given to us around how we isolate our community identities for location.
If I could just respond to that in particular in terms of the title Waihora Fatado. Waihora Fatado is the project name, so it is not attached to any specific building or facility. It is the Fataro, which is the building of the community centre and hall that has a name. But I understand, Deborah, what you're saying has a bigger context around how can we make names that are given exclusive, and I imagine there's a fair bit of complexity that would sit around that sort of an action, but happy to discuss it, particularly with our legal people.
Thanks, Denise and Deborah, for those comments. Page 162 has the cultural narrative and explanation of what Fataro means and carries. For me, when I read the report, I thought, what, we're selling the houses that we just bought for this particular proposal, and then realised it was just the houses, not the properties. So I had to just double check myself there that we hadn't just walked into something that we needed to walk out of. So it's been moved and seconded. All those in favour say aye. Anyone against? Declare it carried. Thanks, Denise, for joining us online. The next item is tab 13, page 169. It's a transportation update. Gareth, thanks for joining us. Denise, you can turn your video off if you like.
Good afternoon. I was just checking something. Apologies. Seems to be a regular comment from me, but apologies. You've got me. Unfortunately, Graham is very unwell at the moment. He's probably watching online, so I've come along this afternoon to just run through the transportation report. Questions which were raised at the last council meeting around the transportation report, the responses have been sent out through the chief executive, and hopefully every councillor has got them. The two comments I would like to just draw upon there is there was a conversation about the estimated costs for the weather events. Those have not been finalised yet, but I can advise that they're currently sitting in the region of around $1.8 to $2 million across the events, so not insignificant. And there was also a question raised around rallies and the particular motor rallies that are taking place. Just as a good news story, the recent Malvern Hills rally took place and resulted in no damage. So other than a routine maintenance grade, which is what council would have done anyway in some sort of reasonable frequency, so there was no costs to them. Onto the transportation report before you. Again, as usual, I'll take it largely as read. Just a few comments that I was going to make when you get to the road and maintenance section. Just want to remind councillors, because I don't know how freshly remembered it is. Each week, you see there's a QR code which is published in a lot of council documents. That QR code is static. It doesn't change. But what does change at 4 p.m. on a Friday behind that is a map and a schedule of all the following week's planned road and maintenance activities with dates. So just want to remind councillors of that, you know, if you capture that QR code, you've always got a direct linkage into the work that's going to go on next week, etc. So you know in your districts what's going down. The other thing I want to just bring councillors up to date with is this is a GIS platform which we've been playing around with HEB and might interest you. This is over the last year. Let me just zoom that. That's all the potholes we've repaired in the last year. The beauty of this, which we just want to illustrate to councillors, is that this slider bar on the bottom we can adjust by weeks. As you can see, the dots changing away. So if we look at the recent weather events, which started at the beginning of July, that's the impact on our district. And we can see a few hot spots already coming in there. Telegraph Road. Yeah. Screaming. Yeah. Screaming. Old West Coast Road. Screaming out. The beauty of this is we're working on this and we promised, or HEB had promised to work on this. You remember the renewal of the tender, and the information is there. But this information is quite deep, it's quite informative, and we hope to be able to take this live to the public. And this is only a pothole layer. The further benefits to this will be grading cycles. How many questions do councillors get about unsealed roads? We'll have the grading cycles on there. We'll have the reseal program where we're going to be doing renewal programs and reseal programs. We'll have signage repairs, just illustration of information that can be put out there. And it's all easily available, but we can, in the last week, that's how many potholes in the last week. Again, Telegraph Road.
Wonder what vehicles caused that.
Eh? Too many vehicles, yeah. Anyway, that's me. Any questions?
Great, yeah, thank you for that. Murray.
Yeah, thanks, Gareth. I'm going to be a bit of a broken record here, and I've just highlighted again school frontage upgrades, just that there are currently very imminent changes in front of Ellesmere College, which is partly from the Ministry of Education, so a rebuild of that college, but also the subdivision across the road. What appears to be the beginnings of the road access into there happening, and just the concern from the college, and I'll acknowledge right here that I'm an employee of the college as well, so I've got a double whammy here, but I'm just conveying that information back, is that the concern is that it will happen out of kilter with all of the overall view, and I think it's really important that we engage quite early. I've said this to the project manager as well. So largely from Ellesmere College's perspective, it's for the ministry to engage with us, not the other way around. But I'm just saying it's very imminent, Gareth. So we could end up with a ill-intended consequences is a concern. Just quickly, a commentary on the road closures for rallying. The commentary there is not around whether we collect a bond. It's about what interaction we have and the impact that has on the ability to run what is a community event. And I think the more conversation we have with those participants and those running the event ahead of time and agreed outcomes before that, the better. So it's really about communication. And I think a lot of the issues that we're probably getting a bit of angst over it will disappear. Yeah, thank you. Good report.
Sure, and I can just confirm in terms of the communication with those organisers, there was a pre-event walkover, there's post-event walkover, and etc.
Thank you for the report, and thank you for that illustrative map. I look forward to it going online. Will you also be using that for deciding future road rebuilds? Because where you seem to have a preponderance of potholes would suggest that the dig out repairs and or more significant works might be preventative maintenance, or in some of the narrower roads, seal widening and the like, where it's cheaper to do a longer term fix than continually fill the same potholes that the next dairy tanker along pulls out. There's a better use for money. So it's just a question. I would see a tool that would obviously indicate those sort of things. That QR code link, I don't recall ever having seen it before. Perhaps you can circulate that in an email to councillors so that we can bring those things up, because they are often helpful for us to find. And I'm actually looking at the chart on page 170. And what really struck my eye was the trend line in the monthly SCR scores. The long-term trend line is down. And that doesn't, that's almost over, that's in fact over a year. The trend line, the red trend line is down, and that wasn't good. And that got me a lot further in those figures. The orange and grey dots, which are the number of audits completed and the number of acceptable audits, what I found surprising there was approximately half of the completed audits are unacceptable. And that I found really concerning. We're not doing a huge number of audits, but of the audits we do, half of them are unacceptable. That is a concern. I mean, I've had issues with some of our traffic management, and I've phoned them through to council where the actual signage is actually inconsistent with the existing speed zone. Where they put a sign up at the end of the speed zone that says it's this speed, which actually is different from the actual underlying speed zone. So I just wonder if this can comment, and you may not be able to comment, Gareth, that those trends and those figures are not good.
Did you want to say something more? I can't comment.
I did want to note that yes, the number of audits are taken as a function of our resourcing, and we are under-resourced, and that's actually something that's been approved in the annual plan for an additional resource in the corridor management area.
And an operational response to that, Councillor, as well. We have currently got, in addition to the new resource coming online, we are currently going through a fairly comprehensive review of corridor management as well. We share concerns out there. We won't identify any particular site or any particular contractor, but the trend in a lot of places is not good, and they need a lot of enforcement and a lot of observation. So that is currently under review. So hopefully you should see some improvements.
Thank you. I'm pleased to know that staff share my concerns.
Just on that, it's hard to know what the acceptable, unacceptable number is. Because I look at that and think 4 out of 7 or 10 out of 12 unacceptable is way too high. But even if it was 10%, maybe that's even way too high. So I don't know what the right, if you could give us, I think there may be more information required for us to understand what's really been reported to us in that graph.
Certainly, and I'd like to go back and look at the composition of that data. I know, because we do an awful lot more audits than 4. But what I believe, and I'm making an assumption here, I need to go back. I believe this refers to what's called a COPTM audit, which is a full breadth audit, not just a visit audit to check signs and cones. And if those audits are unacceptable, the results of those audits get submitted to NZTA in Wellington anyway. They go up there. So there is a threshold, and I'll make sure that's all updated in the next report.
Cool, thank you. And the other thing, just following up from Murray's comment around school frontages, is there's a number of spots right across the district where there seem to be particular corners where heavy vehicles like to park up for whatever reason, and they pull off the road, and those areas become very potholed, muddied. In some places, it looks like there has been some work done to provide some hard fill. Although it doesn't look like it's ever been maintained post it being dropped there. So wondering, is that ever caught by us and the maintenance of those areas? I'm thinking when you turn off State Highway 73 onto Hoskins Road, Norwood down the end of Telegraph Road, Wards Road, Aylesbury Road corner, and there are many more across the district, but those as well to me don't speak to a safe roading environment if we're not allowing the heavy things that obviously pull off the road for a particular reason quite regularly to be able to do so safely. You don't need to respond now, but maybe it's just a follow-up. Great, thank you. Did we have a mover and second? Oh, and Deborah, sorry, online. Turn your microphone on, Deborah.
Sorry. I have a question to ask, and I guess it's where we're actually using our internal roading as secondary flow paths for stormwater and the ongoing maintenance that may occur if we have a high water table and the design of the road. Is there a combination that when the stormwater overflow has to go onto a road, that we have a maintenance program or even a bond with regards to the ongoing maintenance of that particular road?
Don't really understand the question. In terms of the bond bit, Councillor.
Would you like me to explain the situation?
No, we wouldn't. We'll get you to follow up with Gareth outside the meeting.
And I can tell you that if any new roads are constructed or they're taken from developers, we do have a bonding arrangement in place.
Thanks, Gareth. And Deborah, I connect with Gareth after the meeting. Bob. Yeah.
I don't need an answer at the moment, but I was at a Colgate meeting last night and there's a lot of confusion over paper roads. I know that causes enough problems, but who is actually liable for sealing and that? Because some of them, to get into some of these houses now, you need a four-wheel drive. As a chap said to me last night, he said he got into a pothole and he had to put the lights on to find his way out. So... but seriously, it would be just nice to know, even from me as a councillor, exactly where we stand.
Well, paper roads are paper roads. A road that's council legally owned but has chosen not to form or maintain.
Yeah.
So people using using those roads need to be covenantal, really. They just need to look after themselves at their own risk. And if usage becomes significant, then it's up to council to consider whether they want to change the status of that paper road.
So if people are dividing sections on those and building again, have we got any?
The people who, and Rob will probably confirm or not if I'm right, but the people living adjacent to a paper road are responsible for the maintenance of the to the centre line of that paper road.
Yeah. But have we, when you go for a consent for a new building, my question is there anything on the people that are building to actually do anything towards the roads themselves? There isn't?
No, because they'll have access to a proper road, legal road, rather than an access off a paper road.
Not
unless they want the access of a paper road, then they'll be obliged to form it and maintain it themselves.
Yeah, because some of them haven't got the option, Murray. They're straight off paper roads.
It might be an outcome Bob, of us actually assuring that all those roads in Colgate were actually became paper roads and weren't just something that was lost in the ether. Yeah.
I'm going to move and second it for the transportation. Mark, Sophie. Oh, sorry, I had me back tense.
Thank you. It's a long process. What Murray said is exactly right. It would be up to the adjacent landowner who's looking to develop to build that into the cost of the development at that time.
Okay, so let's just make it clear because I've been asked.
Great, thank you. Moving and seconder, it was Mark and Jenny. Great. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Anyone against? Declare it carried. Thank you, Gareth. Next up, we have the property transaction update, tab 14, page 175. Murray.
As always, we try to keep this list of property issues up to date. So what we'll do is basically ask you to take your report as read and we'll attempt to answer any questions you may have.
Great, thank you, Murray, for that. Mark.
Thank you. And this time it's not a complaint or a criticism, it's a compliment to property staff. In fact, zoo staff. Just to be fair and even-handed, I'd like to commend Cameron Raw, who sent an email this morning about Rees Pit and the potential opening and the damage recent weather events have caused it, to keep the ward councillors informed of what's going on. It would appear that the likely opening date, if the weather remains reasonable, is more likely to be October rain.
Yeah.
And so it's a compliment that he has kept us in the loop of the damage. In fact, he circulated some photos of the damage caused by the recent rain events and a bit of slumpage in the area. So that's just a compliment that for keeping us in the loop and keeping us informed.
Yeah, thank you, Mark. The Reed Pit's one of those things that happens with gravity. A big hole beside the road tends to fill up with water in a flood event. So,
thanks, Mark, for those comments. Anything else on the property report? Moved and seconded, Malcolm, you moved. Seconded, Shane. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Anyone against? Declare it carried. Resolution to exclude the public. Review of matters raised in public forum. Do people feel that has been covered, or is there anything further that councillors would like to see happen? Murray?
Yeah, sort of related to the point, Sam, but the question that the legal counsel raised around the 80%, I think we probably just need to be really sure that it is captured. In my head, I'm really sure about it, but that doesn't necessarily, just because we discussed it and we knew what we think we were saying, doesn't necessarily mean that we've got it notated in a way that is clear to those applying. And I think we raised it in the initial discussion around the hearings panel is, why are we hearing this? Yes. And I think we need to clarify that as well, to be fair. Across boundary issues like that, I felt remarkably sorry on their behalf for Bob and Deborah to have to hear something that's not even in our patch. And I know we've got overall, it is ours to rate for, although that was disputed as well. We are rating for it. We just have a different mechanism of recovering it. It's not, they're not specifically rated by Selwyn, but they're rated anyway. We all know how that works, but it's something I think we should seek clarification on and just make sure we have actually got the legal wording correct on our bylaw.
And through you, Mr. Mayor, Murray, it's actually I've got some notes to that effect that I took earlier this afternoon.
Deborah?
Just for a point of clarification on what Murray said, there used to be a Christchurch City Council community board member on the Water Race Committee. Because we don't have a Water Race Committee, but they actually formulated the policy for us to follow, we have expressed some concern about making decisions in another jurisdiction. So I'd like that followed up as well, because I think it's important that that some clarity be set around what goes on in Christchurch and what goes on in Selwyn. Appreciate that comment.
Great, thanks, Deborah. That covers off the matters raised in public forum. Jeff, sorry.
Yeah, that was what I was trying to say. I'm not saying I told you so, but what happens if we find out that the 80% is something that was casually mentioned in our briefing, and we have no standing? Where do we stand if our vote then? So that's why I was saying, why don't we just put it on the table and leave it until we have got our ducks in a row and our facts sorted out? So I do think that we stumbled into a hole a little bit back there. No disrespect to the committee, and that's what I tried to say. It's because of new evidence, and so I'm confused. Yeah.
Thank you. We're not going to relitigate the issue. So this is really was the only thing that was raised in public forum that we believe hasn't already been covered off during the meeting. There's a couple of things that have been raised, but I don't want to get back into the issue of whether we've done that debate. So, Deborah, have you got something else you'd like to raise that we still need to follow up with? No.
Yes,
okay.
I do.
You do.
Sorry, yes, I do. It's to do with clarification of policy around the past Waterways Committee. It would be really, really helpful, given that we've disbanded the Waterways Committee, to understand what policies we need to consider for the future.
Yeah, thank you. Moving second, that we move into PX. Welcome, Jenny. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Against? Declare it carried. And we'll adjourn the meeting and give everyone 20 minutes, and then we'll come back and do the PX matters. I've got Cord joining us at 4, so that's the timing.